Monday, September 29th, here on the Just Baseball Show. You got Jack McMullen and I am Peter Apple. But later, you got Arm Layton and me, Peter Apple, meeting with Buster Olney, senior MLB insider at ESPN, to break down the 2026 free agency class. He has so many nuggets. He talked with agents beforehand, and he brought us all the goods. So that'll be the back half of this episode. And the front 15 to 20, Jack and I are going to talk about the end of the MLB regular season, the fallout, who collapsed, who made it, and we're going to bring some stat leaders. And it's all brought to us by the sportsbook Born in Vegas. Remember, folks, download BetMGM, whether that be on iOS or Android, and use promo code JUSTBASEBALL. Why? First bet offer up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first wager loses. Just remember, gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older. Terms and conditions apply. Jack, you just called 3 games down there in Miami.
Yeah.
And a certain fan base is going home really sad. Break it down.
Mets fans don't like me right now.
No, they
And
do not.
here's what I found out in year one of calling games for the Miami Marlins and in Major League Baseball in general. Nothing is as fun as watching a New York fan base just burst into flames.
What about
When
winning? What about
when the
winning?
when the Marlins swept the Yankees, I mean, it was just unbelievable in early August. It was truly insane. And it was watching the New York Post slap on the back page, can we get a refund for all these deadline relievers that they acquired? And the freeze frame of Caballero, the ball getting under his glove. It was like the sky was falling in the Bronx. And this weekend, the sky was falling in Queens. And it was funny to watch all of that unfold and then watch Reds Brewers in Milwaukee. Uh, I don't know, man. I mean, like, Gary Cohen on SNY said it as well as anybody could ever say it. It was a 3.5 month meltdown, and he said it is complete. Like the blow up, the disintegration, whatever word he used, like it's complete. That was 3.5 months. From June 13th on, they were the fifth worst team in baseball. Fifth worst team in baseball. This is the same league that has the Rockies, the White Sox, the Nationals, bunch of other teams. And they were bottom five in all of baseball. They have the steepest payroll in baseball. They have Juan Soto on year one of a $765 million contract. They brought Alonso back on a 1+1 deal, and within 10 minutes, Alonso was saying he's declining his player option and he's testing free agency. Like, it's just a different beast in New York right now. I don't want to say their level of, like, investment was lower, but it was just like, as a baseball fan, that had to be a really hard Mets team to watch this weekend.
Yeah, you covered most of it. I'm going to take the high road, and I'm not going to go
Was that not
after.
the high road for me? I'm sorry if it wasn't the high road.
I'm just not going to go, I'm going to take the high road, and I'm not even going to mention that you're right. Since June 10th, the Mets had the best record in baseball and then went 40-55 from there. I'm not going to mention that. I'm not going to mention how their $300+ million shortstop and their $765 million outfielder in the final 3 games of the series didn't exactly show up. I'm not going to mention how this is probably the worst collapse, especially when you consider expanded playoffs, especially when you consider the Mets have the largest payroll in Major League Baseball. There's no point in mentioning those things.
Yeah.
So I think both of us are kind of taking the high road here.
Yeah, no, I feel good based on what you just said. I feel good about me taking the high road
We
personally.
both did. We
Yeah,
both
no, we
absolutely did.
definitely both took the high road there.
Yeah.
That's actually totally what I heard from you. That's great. Let's move on. They've got some serious pitching questions, man, and they're due for some sort of overhaul. I have no idea what that overhaul looks like. I feel like it would be a bit reactionary to push Carlos Mendoza out after this year. Um,
Is
but
it
they,
Carlos Mendoza's fault that none of the
I don't think
starters can
so.
go beyond fifth inning?
I don't think so. Honestly, I think that falls on David Stearns a bit, where he took on all of these projects. Like Frankie Montas, we were trying to see how that was going to work. Montas was on the IL to end the year. Mania was on the shelf with an oblique issue. I know Mania was really good last year, but you're telling me like by the end of the season, McLean and Sproat were your only two reliable arms that you were going to? Edwin Diaz had to throw the fifth and the sixth inning. Fifth and sixth. Diaz was like the sixth arm into the game in the fifth inning.
Real quick on Sean Manaea, we did mention at the beginning of the season, right, when I think all of us were pretty aligned on being a little bit lower on the Mets than the market.
Yeah.
We mentioned that Sean Manaea was coming off a season in which he pitched the most innings in his career, right? A lot of these Mets arms had a lot of innings on them and didn't have a long track record of success. And then what do? They make it even riskier by bringing in Clay Holmes, who put together a good year,
Yeah.
but he just could never really give them any length.
At
And
the end of the day, that was 170 innings, 165, 170 innings of a 3.5 ERA.
really solid.
Holmes made every start. Like that was a good year for Clay Holmes, I think. It was just everybody else, man. And how could anyone know that the deadline would backfire on them the way that it did? Mullins was brutal in a Mets uniform.
Helsley.
Helsley was brutal in a Mets uniform. Gregory Soto, he was hard to watch at points in a Mets uniform. The only guy that was consistently good and all reliable was Tyler Rogers, but like that guy's going to be all reliable wherever he plays.
Yeah.
It was weird, man, but you know what? Credit to the fighting fish. I think the baseball world keyed in to the Marlins on a couple of occasions this year, and they appreciated the brand of baseball that the Miami Marlins played. So, what I'll give you on the Marlins 2025 season is the pesky, scrappy, annoying, fun team that you watched this weekend take 2 or 3 from the New York Mets. That's what I got to watch for 6 months, and I was just so grateful to be a part of that and be part of the soundtrack to that for 6 months.
Absolutely. Let's move over to the Tigers versus the Red Sox. Big sigh of relief, Tigers fans. Although per Bob Nightingale, the Tigers went 7-17 in September, which is the worst record in the final month of a season by a playoff team. That's all that matters. By a playoff team since the World Series began in 1903. But luckily, they win on Saturday, so they don't have to pitch Tarek Skubal on Sunday, which means he'll be available for the first game of the wild card against those Cleveland Guardians.
Right.
I cannot wait to watch this series. And we're going to do a full postseason predictions episode tomorrow. So I don't really want to ruin anything and kind of talk about that series. But the Tigers are in. Can't feel all that great, especially losing the last game of the season. But again, it's okay. You're in. And, we're hearing quotes from Scott Harris. We're hearing quotes from AJ Hinch. Basically, wipe the slate clean. Everybody is 0-0. And at the end of the day, we have Tarek Skubal on the mound, and we have an offense that can bang when they're all getting going. And sometimes, and Scott Harris, I agree with him, there are plenty of examples of teams limping in who end up making a major impact in the postseason. There was actually a study done. I got to find it. I'll send it to Peyton again so we can put it up. Late momentum, like a nice winning record in September, is
Yeah.
not actually indicative of postseason success.
Really, that goes against every trend that I've ever thought in the history of ever.
100%. And I got to find that study again so we can put it up. But for all those watching on YouTube, but yes, I found that.
Are
And
you
I was
reading
like,
academic journals? Is that what you do in your free time? You go to JSTOR?
I saw it on Twitter and then I
Oh,
clicked on the
nice.
article. I clicked on the article and the proof was in the pudding. So we'll find
I
it.
saw a study, which is I
Was a
saw
study.
a tweet.
It was a study. No, I mean, it was an
Study.
article with a study into it.
Oh, okay.
All I'm saying is you can wipe the slate clean. You're going up against the Guardians, who you know well. And then who knows? And then who knows? I mean, what can you say about the Tigers? They
If you
limped
want the
in.
Detroit Tigers to be your scrappy pick in the American League, go ahead. By all means, you go ahead and do that.
My gambling senses. Everyone's going to be on the Guardians. It's going to be a free pick. The Tigers have crumbled. Wipe the slate clean.
Whatever, man.
Red Sox end the season strong. They're in the playoffs as well. And Reds Brewers. Reds lose 2 of 3, but they own the tiebreaker, so they get in. It was pretty poetic, I thought, to end the season for both the Reds and the Mets. They both lose, and yet the Reds get in. Because Arm and I talked about Francona's lineups at length on Friday's episode. We spent the first 20 minutes trying to make sense
Figure
of
out why Sal Stewart and Miguel Andujar are not in there every day.
or Tyler Stevenson,
Yeah.
which pisses me off because of how good the bat has been for Tyler Stevenson. Andujar played, Sal Stewart, Tyler Stevenson did not. But Jose Trevino is Brady Singer's catcher, but they lose that game. But again, not that big of a deal. The Reds are in, and you still got to go through Hunter Green. You
Yep.
still got to go through Nick Lodolo, Andrew Abbott, and Brady Singer, but they have to play the Dodgers.
I saw Nightingale tweet that Tito in his managerial career was 17-6 in game 162s. I was like, that's hard to fathom. He loves closing day. And they're 17-7 now. That was a fascinating game to monitor. And by the way, can I just say, Major League Baseball, one of the best things that they do is have every game 162 start in the same 15-minute window.
I love it too.
Every game started between 3:05 and 3:20, and it was beautiful.
The
You know what
only
it is?
issue-
It's the Premier League fixture thing, or like the Champions League fixture where you can't scoreboard watch. It's just, oh, this is happening while this is happening, and we'll see what happens. Like the Mets knew when and in the eighth inning. It's not like they knew in the first inning. Like you found out in the eighth, and you were already down 4-0.
The only issue with it is that my viewing pleasure is kind of screwed up because there's
Oh, are you kidding? That's like red zone for one day of the baseball calendar. I'm in.
I know, but I want to deeply watch each game. Like I want to watch from 1 to 9 instead of continually switching channels. All right, these guys got these guys on base. What decision is he's going to make? It's just I was overstimulated. That's all I'm going to say. I was overstimulated.
I see. Now, are you an NFL red zone fan?
No, not really.
I am not either.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of scoreboard watching. Now, granted, like I was calling a game, so I couldn't sit there and try and keep track of, the 5, 10 games. There were what? There were 4 games that actually mattered on Sunday, and the rest were just elimination games.
Pretty
and then
much.
all of a sudden, Shane Smith was perfect through 5, so people
I
kept
know.
tabs on that. It was like, oh man, what are we doing? It was interesting to me keeping tabs from not afar, but like just clicking around box score and it's like, oh, what's happening now? Oh, Danny Jansen homered. Okay, like this has a ripple in our game. That is really, really fun. And I'd be curious to know if Mets fans are watching this. I'd be a little surprised if Mets fans wanted to take in baseball content the day after that happened.
Probably not.
If Reds fans are watching this, if Blue Jay fans, if Yankee fans, if Red Sox fans, if Tigers fans were watching this, did you enjoy the theater of 162 and all of them starting at the same time?
I mean, I think it depends if they won or not.
Yeah, sure, but like I would be curious to know, like, did they like the rush of keeping tab on another game while your game is happening?
The reason I do love it the most is because it's really hard to make these in-game decisions if you're a manager when you're playing the game at the same time. It's much easier when you know a team is lost or won in front of you and you have a game 4 hours later and then you can adjust. Nobody can adjust, so you just have to kind of go out there and win. And now it really only was centered on like Yankees, Blue Jays, and the Red series and the Mets series. But I would find that interesting to see if like the Reds played first and lost or the Mets played first and lost. I guess it wouldn't have mattered because that means the other team is automatically in. So I think that's a moot point anyway. I'm really just talking myself into loving it, even though in the moment I was overstimulated.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right, but that's kind of soft. Let's talk Guardians Rangers. Guardians, winners of the American League Central. They were 11 games back on September 5th. It's September 28th, the day we're recording. They win 2 of 3 from the Rangers, and their last game, Guards ball, scored 4 in the bottom of the 10th, highlighted by Brian Rocchio, 3-run home run to win it. They have the lowest batting average ever. I saw this on the Guardians broadcast for a playoff team, and yet they're in. We were talking about how the Guardians made this comeback in the division, and it was all pitching. I mean, in the month of September, this team was a bottom 10 team when it comes to WRC+.
Yeah.
Timely hitting and just incredible pitching. I'm really interested to see how they're going to line up that postseason rotation. Like, who's the odd man out? You assume it's Gavin Williams and Tanner Bybee, games 1 and 2. And then what? Is it Parker
Cantillo.
Mel- You
Have
think
to
it's-
be Cantillo.
Even over Slade Coney? Even
Yes,
Parker
has
Messick
to
is
be Joey
tossed.
Cantillo.
Hmm. There's a part of me. Yeah. Cantillo, though, does have experience out of the bullpen. I wonder if they're going to weigh that and prefer him in a Swiss
Brother,
Army knife type role.
he gave you 95 innings at a 3.2 ERA.
No, I agree.
Last, I mean, last start of the year against Texas, he goes 5 2/3 of 2-run baseball, King 8. You
Yeah, it's,
have to give the ball to Cantillo game 3.
maybe if necessary, who knows? Maybe they win the first two and it doesn't matter.
We'll see.
We'll
But
see.
then you get into the DS, and all of a sudden you need 3 starters.
I It's probably going to be Cantillo. I guess the reason I said that is because yes, Cantillo certainly finished the season the best, but Ciccone has more experience as a starter and also ended the season pretty strong, except for his last start. And Messick was shoving the minute he got called up.
No, for me, it's Cantillo, no contest. His last 5 starts, 6 innings, 1-run ball, 7 Ks, 8 scoreless, 5 Ks, 5 innings, a 1-run ball, 3 Ks, 4 1/3 a 1-run ball, 5 Ks, 5 2/3 a 2-run ball, 8 Ks. Have to give it to Joey Cantillo.
I'm with that. I'd love to
I'm
see
going to
Joey
do a
Cantillo.
dramatic reading of the bottom 5 in team batting average this year.
Okay.
Coming in at 26th, the Texas Rangers as a team hit 234. The fourth worst team batting average in Major League Baseball this year belonged to the Chicago White Sox at 232. The worst team batting average in the major leagues and 28th in all of baseball, the Pittsburgh Pirates at 231. The Cleveland Guardians were 5 points lower than the Pittsburgh Pirates at 226. And the only team lower than the Cleveland Guardians at 225 was
The Colorado Rockies.
no. The Rockies were actually 237. That is bottom 10,
Of
but
course.
outside the bottom 5. The LA Angels hit 225 as a team.
Sam Blum, he said in his most recent tweet, Angels struck out the second most in the history of an MLB season.
Yeah. But hey, we got a 35 homer season from Joe Adele, which was sick.
Hell yeah, we did. And 30 plus from Taylor Ward. All right, let's talk Yankees, Blue Jays before we just kind of go over who ended up leading in some certain stats. Yankees and Blue Jays both sweep. Jays win the division with the tiebreaker, getting the bye as well. And now the Yankees take on the Red Sox, and the Blue Jays get a bye. Shout out the Blue Jays, man. I mean, the Rays are pesky, even though they rested Yandy Diaz and Brandon Lau and Chandler Simpson in their last game. Sweeping that team is tough. It is, especially a team that would love to kick you out. And great sweep by the Yankees as well. Judge just continues to hit, and he's made the MVP conversation even more interesting, even though Cal finished with 60 home runs. He added a couple more. He, you know, got more distance in the F War competition as well, finishing right around 10. I looking at the numbers again before we press the record button. I think Judge is the MVP. We'll talk about that later. But the numbers just stack up so well for him. But regardless, Stanton's heating up. 24 home runs in 75 games is ridiculous. But Yankees Red Sox ain't going to be easy. I remember 04. I remember 18.
You remember '04 because there are 15 documentaries about it, and there's a new one coming to ESPN, and I can't wait to watch it.
How
Psych.
could I forget? How could I forget? 2018, 2021 was a nightmare. 2021 especially was a
That
nightmare.
was the Kike Hernandez masterclass.
That was Garrett Cole just getting crushed after. And that was the first year of our podcast where I'm just screaming from the mountaintops about the Yankees are going to dominate them just to get
Yeah.
embarrassed.
You've
But I've
become
said
much
that a
more of a
lot.
journalist since then.
Yeah, I'm much smarter now. And there's no way I'm going to buy back into the Yankees 4 years later. Oh, wait, here we are. Here we are. We're back, Jack. We're back. Yankees are going to cakewalk through this American
Shut up.
League.
Shut up. Shut up.
No, congratulations to the Toronto Blue Jays. They earned it. An incredible season. The lineup was fantastic. Getting Shane Bieber was huge. Bullpen kept it together. Blue Jays win the AL East for the first time since 2015. They're definitely going to be a tough out. They get a little bit of extra rest. They also get home field advantage They've been unbelievable in Toronto this season, one of the best home teams in baseball. So that's huge for them. And if you're the Tigers or the Guardians or the Yankees or the Red Sox, you got to go through a couple of teams who are fantastic at home.
Yep.
Ain't going to be easy. And then in the National League, the Reds taking on the Dodgers. The who else? I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah, you got Reds, Dodgers, and then you got Padres, Cubs at Wrigley.
Padres,
And
Cubs at
then the
Wrigley.
winner of Padres, Cubs goes to Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And the winner of Dodgers, Reds goes to
Goes to
Philadelphia.
Philly. We are in for such.
I'm so fired up.
And then again, just another reminder for everyone: tomorrow, Aram, Jack, and I, the three of us, are going to do a postseason predictions episode.
And it's going to be fun because it's going to be kind of rapid fire. It's sports grid timing. So we're going to have to like actually be not concise, but very direct with our thoughts. This team is going to win this series. Why?
Yeah,
It's going to be really interesting to kind of go through that. And then, of course, we'll give you our World Series winners at the end of that. I know
100%.
you're going to tell us about stat leaders in a moment, but before that, would you mind if I filled people in about our friends at Ethos?
Get after it.
Been sick for like a week.
Mm,
Just stinks.
mm.
Like I've got a cough. It's not chest pain, but I feel like just not even tightness. I don't want to be an alarmist, but like I just feel heaviness and like a little cloud, a little fog in my chest. Again, like I've been taking my Mucinex, but I'm also thinking about my fiance. Is she going to be okay if this is the one that does me in? I am a total alarmist. I am a total alarmist. Like if I have the sniffles, I might be out of here in 5 days. We'll see what happens. And I want to make sure my fiance, my whole family is protected. And I'm going to do that with our friends at Ethos Life Insurance. Okay. Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance fast and easy to protect your family's future in minutes, not in months. There's no medical exam required. All you got to do, answer a few health questions. Get a quote in as little as 10 minutes. You can get same day coverage without ever leaving your house. Some policies as low as $2 a day, billed monthly. Ethos is a trustworthy company that disrupts the traditional life insurance industry. 3 million families have completed their applications and trusted Ethos to help find the right coverage. Ethos has 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 2,400 reviews. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/justbaseball. That's ethos.com/justbaseball. Application times may vary. Rates may vary.
Real quick before we get to the interview with Buster Olney, your MLB leader in games, Rafael Devers at 163.
Okay, so he's the first guy to get to 163 since Justin Morneau in 2008. That is freaking awesome.
That is awesome. In terms of hits, your MLB hits leader, Bobby Witt Jr., finishes with 184, 8-1. Cash it. Cash it, Jack.
Congratulations.
Bobby Witt Jr. to lead MLB in hits, finishes with 184. I mean, Bo Bichette would have won this if he stayed healthy. Trey Turner could have won this if he stayed healthy. But Bobby Witt Jr. played the long game and finished with 184. Luis Arias finishing in a tie for second again with Bo Bichette. Your doubles leader, Bobby Witt Jr. with 47. Your triples leader, Corbin Carroll with 17. Your home run leader, obviously, Cal Raleigh with 60. Your RBI leader, Kyle Schwarber, 132 RBIs, 56 home runs. Can you believe that there was two people on a certain baseball podcast, and this baseball podcast is popular? Like, some people like it. They said Kyle Schwarber shouldn't be a top 100 guy. Can you believe that podcast?
I think we said he shouldn't be, or I think those
Oh,
two
you
people.
you guys said it?
No. I
No
think
way. You
those,
guys said it.
hold on. I think the two people on this podcast that said it said that he shouldn't be at number 50.
No, I don't remember that. I remember I listened to the show because I think it's a good show. I thought there was good analysts on it, but if I could remember correctly, which I am, they said shouldn't be on the top 100, which is interesting.
Quick note on the Corbin Carroll thing, by the way. He has played 3 full seasons in Major League Baseball. He has led the National League and Major League Baseball in triples all 3 times.
That's a cool stat.
That's sick.
That is sick. All right, let's look at walks. Juan Soto is your MLB leader in walks.
Broke the franchise record. John Olerud in 99 had that.
James Wood leads Major League Baseball with 221 punchouts. Riley Green also finished with over 200 strikeouts. Jose Caballero is your leader in stolen bases. Aaron Judge wins the American League batting title, hitting 331. And Trey Turner wins the National League batting title, 304.
What happened to our beautiful game of baseball? One qualified hitter in the National League at 300. One.
And there are two qualified hitters in baseball with an OPS over 1,000. That is Shohei Ohtani at 1.014 and Aaron Judge at 1.145. Jack, our wins leader, Max Fried.
Yeah.
Don't have a 20-game winner this year.
19. That's interesting.
Your
Cool.
MLB leader in losses, Kyle Freeland at 17.
Feels right.
Paul Skeens is your ERA leader at 1.97, and your qualified ERA, what should we call it? Your qualified ERA loser? It's kind of mean.
Yeah, highest ERA among qualified starters.
Jake Irvin of the Washington Nationals at 5.70. Your leader in innings, Logan Webb at 207, and your MLB leader in strikeouts, Garrett Crochet at 255. Cash it. Plus 1,100. Garrett Crochet. We love it.
Good
Garrett
for
Crochet,
you.
Bobby Wood Jr. Feels good. Those are your stat leaders. And the Milwaukee Brewers with the best record in baseball. Someone was saying in our Discord that is the best regular season he has ever seen as a fan of the Milwaukee Brewers. Pretty damn cool.
How about it?
So without further ado, let's talk 2026 free agency with senior MLB insider for ESPN, Buster Olney. We welcome on a very special guest to the Just Baseball Show, Buster Olney, senior MLB insider at ESPN, to break down the 2026 free agency class. But Buster, my first question before we break into it, what storyline to end this season right now is taking up the most real estate in your head? Is it the collapse of the Mets, Tigers, Astros? Get into it. First thing, Mets. Let's talk.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, guys. And I know we're going to talk about the offseason, and your question, you told me ahead of time that was what the topic was going to be, and it's got my brain percolating, so I'm fired up to talk with you. There's no doubt that the Mets collapse is historic. You know, people have asked me, where would you rank this in history? And I think it's the worst because of the safety nets, right? If you're a baseball nerd like me, you've been talking about through the years the 1914 Boston Braves coming back. You've been talking about the Phillies blowing it in 1964. Well, in those two cases, only one team from each league made the playoffs. When I was 14 years old, the Red Sox blew a 14-game lead to the New York Yankees. There were only two American League teams that made the playoff at that time. There are six National League teams that make the playoffs, and the Mets played in the NLCS last fall. They went out and signed Juan Soto for $765 million. They got off to an unbelievable start. Their pitching was terrific. And so the idea that they, despite all those safety nets in place for their team, might not make the playoffs is incredible.
It's funny because I was thinking about 07 and like that from just a statistical standpoint, I guess, or how many games you're up, how many games are left is insane and tough to beat with the Mets. But then you think about the safety nets, as you put it, and we've talked about it on the podcast. It feels like it's a battle of like who wants it the least, where you could be very mediocre down the stretch here and probably still comfortably be in the wild card if you're the Mets. So what would you, in your eyes, just from watching this team, what would you attribute maybe the collapse? And of course, when you're collapsing like this, it's a myriad of things. But if you had to highlight a couple things that have stood out to you with this Mets team, what is it?
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of different conversations about different things. I mean, obviously, the manager always takes the hit. People will complain about him. There's going to be a conversation in the wintertime about the chemistry in the clubhouse. It's the pitching. I mean, since June 13th, they're 37 and 58, 37 and 58 with a 5.01 ERA. And here's the great question, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall of the conversations between Steve Cohen and David Stearns in the wintertime. They spend the money on Soto, this incredible contract. Then they signed Pete Alonso. And as that's playing out, I would love to know what was said between the owner and the head of baseball operations because David Stearns' history is that he can find a way to make pitching out of very little. Did they bank on that, or was the spending restricted in any way? Did they have to go for the second tier guys? Because it jumped out at us last winter that they weren't going after the aircraft carrier, the Max Frieds, guys like that. So, and when they got off to a good start, I can remember saying, "Hey, great job by David Stearns and his staff picking the right guys, and people like Griffin Canning, Clay Holmes look good." And it has evaporated. And now on top of that, what you wonder about is the impact on all these young pitchers probably rushed to the big league sooner than the Mets ever envisioned. As we go forward, what kind of impact does it have on someone like Jonah Tong? It's going to be a complicated winter for the Mets.
So, Buster, we're recording with you on Saturday, so the season isn't quite over yet. So, unfortunately for Mets fans, let's assume the worst. Let's say that by the time people are listening to this, maybe the Mets are not in the playoffs. You mentioned those conversations with Stearns and Steve Cohen. What are those conversations then going to look like this offseason if they don't make the playoffs?
And you got to believe that there will be conversation of, look, we need more bedrock with the starting rotation. We have to go get more. We have to get experience. We have to get guys who we think can handle New York. Number one, and getting ready for this conversation, thank you for sort of nudging me to do this. I reached out to some agents, got some feedback. Shane Bieber. Yeah, like he's an experienced guy. He's got a rock solid reputation as a clubhouse guy. Someone who works like crazy. He's going to be the highest paid free agent pitcher, and so you would assume the Mets will be in on that. Michael King, a product of the New York, Connecticut area, pitched for the Yankees. He's been in New York before. He absolutely would be someone you would assume they would take a shot at. Dylan Cease, another free agent who's going to make a lot of money. You'd assume they'd have conversations with him as well, along with teams like the Orioles. But you got to believe that is going to be priority number one, maybe even over Pete Alonso. It feels like that Pete Alonso, when they signed him last year, that was a Steve Cohen signing. Like Steve Cohen, we know from David Stearns' history that he feels like that he can, find a first baseman. He can make up first base offense. He could move Vientos or do something like that. I mean, my God, he DFA'd Chris Carter after Chris Carter led the National League in home runs one year. So if you're the Mets, your priority is going to be spending on pitching, and you do wonder if there's going to be that ripple effect that's going to hit Pete Alonso directly.
I wanted to follow up on the comment you made about having the highest paid pitcher being Shane Bieber. It makes a lot of sense given how good he has looked out of the Tommy John surgery, and you think about how he was able to pitch even when he was kind of on and off the IL. You could tell he was throwing through some discomfort before that, and velo was down a little bit, and just he can execute his way to success. Now the velo is up a little bit, and I think a lot of teams are going to be excited about that. But at the same time, not as much of a sample size off the TJ, and then you have a lot of unique pitchers here that create their own, just complicated conversations, like a Zach Gallen who's finished the year really strong. But I think the QO will be an interesting conversation. You mentioned Dylan Cease, which feels like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're the Padres and maybe a lot of other teams that are looking at him. How confident are you in how much do you think Shane Bieber will kind of lead the way as maybe the highest paid pitcher?
Based on the conversations I've had with these agents, I think he absolutely is going to be the number one guy. Because he's demonstrated in his time with the Blue Jays that, hey, he's back. And we should note this, like I don't think I can remember another case of someone coming back from that surgery and being that steady, right? And maybe, and you guys know this, the guys in the Toronto front office came from Cleveland. Shane Bieber stayed in Cleveland for this year because he wanted to continue to work with their medical staff. The Toronto guys know the Cleveland medical staff, and maybe all that information led to them maybe making one of the best trades at the deadline and adding Bieber. But to see him be this good right out of the gate compared to someone like Sandy Alcantara, who at the beginning of the year really struggled, I think there are a lot of teams that are going to have confidence that he'll be good going forward. The conversations I've had with agents, they think he's going to, certainly his representatives are going to aim high for that Corbin Burns range. For someone who next May will be 31, my guess he's probably north of Tyler Glasnow, somewhere in that Aaron Nola range, 150 to 175. But yeah, I don't think Framber Valdez is getting that. I don't think Dylan Cease is getting that. Some of the other names we talked, Michael King, I don't think we'll get that. But I think Shane Bieber is going to get a pretty good contract because he's all the way back from Tommy John surgery and because of the belief in the guy and how he works.
Another question, you mentioned him at the tail end, Framber Valdez, because many would assume, just based on his body of work, his dominance in the playoffs, how safe he is just because of how many ground balls he generates, a cold-blooded nature to Framber that I think baseball fans really appreciate, where he never really gets too high or too low until the unintentional cross-up, right, with his catcher. I said after the fact that I thought there was a potential that would end up messing with his market, that general managers might see that and say, we really don't like that. Do we want to give a guy like that 5 years, 9 figures, when the pitching market also is risky? So my question to you is, do you think that is going to affect his market?
So, Peter, I'm going to push back to you on this. Okay. I think that the perception of Framber within the sport is that he does have ups and downs. And you could see it in the game that he's can be an emotional pitcher. He gets frustrated at times. And so that incident, I don't think, and I read some people were saying it's going to, hurt his market. Teams aren't going to bid after. I'm like, come on, that's overstated. You're not going to consider giving a guy $100 million and judge him on his worst 5 seconds of his life as a pitcher. But I do think that moment sort of reinforces the perception of him as being an emotional guy. And if you are the Mets, right, and you're thinking about bringing a guy into New York,
no.
How does that? Now, my instinct is someone, covered the Yankees for a lot of years, covered the Mets for a year. There are guys, and there are those conversations in those front offices. Is this player suited for this market, for a New York, a Boston, and Philadelphia? Framber would give me pause, but I do think he's going to do okay. Somewhere north of where Mania got, maybe it's a 4 for 22, 4 for 23 range. Do I think that someone's going to be out there with that monster Max Fried contract? I would be surprised, but I think he's going to do fine.
Building on just kind of another unique, and this is going to be the biggest, the highest paid guy in free agency this year, but just a unique circumstance given that Kyle Tucker, I mean, we looked at him as kind of a sure thing to be pushing close to 400 million. I thought I would have taken the over going into this year just on the body of work. That's a guy that's been as consistent as anybody when he's on the field, and just such a well-rounded game. But now you have a newer trend, but it's 2 years straight now of injuries, right? The shin fracture last year, this year, the calf that hasn't gotten better, and then the hand issue. But he's still Kyle Tucker, and he's still going to end up turning in a phenomenal season. And frankly, if I were a team that had that budget, I would give him the deal, and I'd be happy to die on that hill. But from your sense, how many teams do you think are feeling that way? And on top of that, and I think the most important layer to this question is, the Cubs, I just think optically, they're a team that might be, as we talk about, Scooball and why the Tigers, it should be important for them to keep them. But like the Cubs, with what they gave up, with 1 year here, if it doesn't go great and they don't make a run, do you feel like there's a lot of pressure on Chicago here to retain Kyle Tucker?
There's pressure on the Cubs to do something. I agree with you. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you were to line up organizations and how cheap they're perceived to be, the Pirates are number one. I mean, they are undefeated number one. They've been holding that title for a while, right? Cubs are somewhere in the top 5. I mean, the idea that the Chicago Cubs have typically had, payroll range in the 13, 14, it's kind of ridiculous, and we turn on the television, we see Wrigley Field, filled every day. But the general perception of the Cubs is they're not going to be the team that's going to go nutso to sign, a high-end free agency. That said, and I thought you framed it perfectly where Kyle Tucker is. He's had these 2 years where he's demonstrated that A, he can be a really great player, but B, he's also had the injuries, and he had a 2-month stretch during the season where he really struggled. He's also considered to be a good defensive player. He's a good base runner. He's a versatile guy. At the beginning of the year, I would have thought that he would clear $500 million. I don't think he's going to do that because of the concerns, and because I don't know exactly if there's going to be a volume of teams that are out there saying, That's the guy we have to have in short order. We've talked about the Phillies and what they might do. I think the priority is Kyle Schwarber. And I wonder, could you sign another $40 million guy after you sign Schwarber? I don't know. I don't know if they would go after a second guy. The Yankees, I don't think they're going to go after him. I don't think they'd be willing to pay him $450 million. Beginning of the year, I thought maybe they would, but now I don't think so. So where is the marketplace exactly that he's going to get a contract like that? And I'd say it this way: if the Cubs wind up getting seriously involved in this, that's bad news for Kyle Tucker and his representation, because I don't think they're going to wind up going bonkers. That's just not the way they do their work. I do think Tucker's going to do well. He's going to get somewhere north of 350, maybe in that 350 to $400 million range. But I think this year probably has cost him the opportunity to go in that Vladdy Jr. Juan Soto neighborhood.
And just sorry, Peter, just following up on that really quickly. Do you think the struggles have, because the way it sounds in the hesitance, I think, for the Cubs to spend, and I always joke that they need to go buy another apartment complex across the street instead. But do you think his price being driven down increases their chances by a nominal amount or a decent amount, or if it's still north of 300, I don't think the Cubs are going to spend that.
I don't think it's an apples for apples comparison, but in some ways it reminds me a little bit of where the Mets and Alonso were last year, right? I think the Cubs absolutely would love to have Kyle Tucker back, just as the Mets would love to, have Pete Alonso back, they did last year. The question is, where's the price? I don't think the Cubs are an organization that's going to go, to 500 million if that's where the bidding drives it. That's all it takes. I mean, I could be completely full of crap if a team like the Giants jumps in and says, that's the guy we want, and we're willing to pay him 450, 500. But that's the question: who will push the Cubs? And if there isn't necessarily a team out there, will the market come back to the Cubs to a point where they're more comfortable?
Speaking about that market, do you think there's a world where Kyle Tucker is surveying and saying to himself, yeah, there's some 10 for 300s, there's some 11 for 350s out there, but I don't really want that. I'd rather take a Bregman type deal where it's super high AAV on a very short-term deal with opt-outs. So potentially if he wins the MVP next year because he has it in him, he can then re-enter the market and look for that 400 million plus contract. Or do you really think it's going to be a 300 million plus? It just might not get much higher.
I think it'd be worthwhile for he to have that conversation with his group, because I'm basing this on conversations during the summertime and other folks in the industry. Kyle Tucker is perceived to be a really great player. He has not been consistently a top 5 player for MVP, the way that a Juan Soto has. And for him to, let's say he were to do what you were suggesting. Let's say he takes a 5-year deal, 6-year deal with an opt-out after year one. That to me might make some sense that he would do that, to go out and look for that year where he is a top 5 player for the MVP award. That would vault him, from that 350 range, maybe higher.
So do you have a feeling right now of where you think he's going to end up? Because we talked a lot of dollar amounts. We've talked about a couple of different teams. Do you have a gut feeling where you say Kyle Tucker's going here?
I think he's going to go back to the Cubs. And as I said to you, beginning of the year, I thought he was going to go to the Yankees. But with the way this year is played out, the fact that he hasn't had a dominant season, I think the market will push him back to the Cubs.
Is there a free agent storyline that is most intriguing to you that we maybe haven't touched on yet? Of course, Tucker is going to be a big one. I think Bieber is a really fun one. For me, Cody Bellinger, for example, just the year that he's had being in New York, just seemingly the importance that he has to this team. And honestly, I think it's multifaceted too. Like Trent Grisham, you see what he's done this year as well, but I'd also be like, do I want to give that guy a long-term deal? I don't know. He has one of the craziest home run to double splits I've ever seen in my life, by the way. I think it's like 33 homers and what is it, like 12 doubles last 6 double? I don't know. Yeah. But is there a free agent storyline? I am definitely going to circle back if it's not that to get your thoughts on the Yankees outfield situation with those two guys. But Is there a story that you're most excited to kind of see how it develops, or that you find yourself maybe reaching out to some agents and sources a little bit more because your curiosity just has peaked?
So I'll give you one first off on Cody Bellinger. What's interesting is that he's bounced from these like from one iconic franchise to another. Going from the Dodgers, going to the Cubs, going to the Yankees. And the thing that so impressed me about him is how pliable he is, right? I mean, he has been a perfect fit for the Yankees. Grew up in the clubhouse. His dad, Clay, I covered him back in the day. He's so much. He's telling Aaron Boone that the moment that they acquired him, hey, you can play me anywhere you want, and they bounced him around to different spots, and he's had a really good year. I mean, if you watch the Yankees on a regular basis, and I know you guys do, I don't think people understand how good a year he's had. But I think he's going to be really expensive, and given some of the other constraints the Yankees have, I don't think they'll be the team that pays him. And he's demonstrated he can go from one team to another and be completely comfortable. I wonder about the Houston Astros, right? To me, would be a great fit for them if you're talking about, and he's at that stage where he could use that finishing 6-year contract, 7-year contract in his career. To answer your question now, after meandering on here about Cody Bellinger for a little bit, Bo Bichette's free agency is fascinating to me because you guys have seen the defensive metrics. There's a general perception is he's not a good shortstop. He's much better suited to go someplace else. I haven't talked to Bo about this. I don't know how he feels about it. We saw Marcus Semien when he was a free agent. He had a great year with the Blue Jays. The Rangers wanted to talk to him about second base. He was like, okay, that's great. And he moved. I don't know what Bo feels about that. And, what will people with teams look at and focus on? Will they focus on really and not a very good 2024, not a great start this year. And then he gets back to raking as the season goes along. And how open will he be to shifting to another position? I think we have to, and especially after the way the Tigers have sort of faded at the end, I think they're going to do something big this winter. I've talked to people in the sport who also think he's going to do something big. He might be a guy who could be a fit there. The question is at what price, right? And as I told you guys, I've been talking to agents and trying to get sort of a range of where the prices are. And I had one agent say to me, like, I'm staying out of that one. This is like a Chris Bryant thing where I'm going to give you a price and there'd be one team that jumps in and might blow it out of the water, the way that the Rockies did when they gave Bryant 182. So just because of the uncertainty in how he's going to be evaluated as a player, I think it makes it fascinating. He's obviously a good major league player, but at what position and at what price?
How do you think his market changes if he's playing at shortstop or if he's playing at second base? Because I feel like with a guy like him, you're really just signing the bat, and the bat is the big value there. Do you think that if he says, I am willing to play second base, do you think that would get more teams involved that could actually raise his market? Or how do you see that playing out?
I think it would help him much in the same way that it did with Marcus, because if he comes in the marketplace and says, I will only be a shortstop, that is the place I want to be. I got to say, you look around now that the Braves theoretically have sort of filled this shortstop spot with this great waiver claim, Ha-Seong Kim. Who's paying in the market this winter for a shortstop? They're not. I don't see a volume of teams just desperate for shortstops right now. The other thing too is that there has been a lot of commentary among the teams. Like, remember 2-3 years ago, and we talked about that amazing class of free agent shortstops. Think about how that has played out for the teams. Not nearly the way that I think the teams probably would want it, which is why if he insists on being a shortstop, and I don't think he will, because I'm sure that he's going to want to demonstrate some pliability. If he insists on being a shortstop, I think there are going to be a lot of teams reluctant to pay someone who's, in the middle of his career as if he's a shortstop.
So you spurred a thought for me with the Tigers specifically, because I think, again, no matter how the season ends for them, I think it's clear that they need to be a little bit more aggressive this offseason, or I think they're going to have fans very frustrated, which it should be a really exciting time given where the farm system's at, the direction they're headed. I think there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on what Scott Harris has built there, and he's been able to prove that I think he can create that infrastructure for development. And to that point, one of my favorite prospects in baseball for the last 2 years, people, our listeners of our show are probably sick of hearing me talk about Kevin McGonigal, but McGonigal going to the fall league, guy that, is probably the best pure hitter in the minor leagues for my money. I think can get by at shortstop, but I know Harris really does, like the defensive side of things to be, plus usually in the infield. He could be a guy that plugs it short, but also Glaber's on a 1-year deal, so you could end up sliding him over to second. He could play third. Bichette seems like an interesting candidate because you start him at shortstop there. If the defense is frustrating and McGonigal continues to come along, maybe you shoot him over. But that's just the beginning of, I guess, the tip of the iceberg of what do you think that infield situation is going to look like? Because Javi Baez, it was a fun story, but the way he looked in the second half, I think expecting anything out of him next year would be setting yourself up for failure. Trey Sweeney was just a disappointment this year and looks more like a bench, kind of utility piece. How do you see them filling out that infield?
So generally speaking, I think AJ Hinch loves the positional flexibility. He likes the idea of the matchups. That's something that the Dodgers 10 years ago, when Andrew Friedman group took over, they tended to do that more. I think AJ loved that. We had him on Sunday Night Baseball a few times in the middle of the year. This is when the Tigers are doing okay. And he was really good with that. However, we've seen what we've seen in the second half. And it does feel like that they need some more bedrock in that lineup. And on top of that, you've got the pressure of the Tarik Skubal situation. He is a free agent after 2026. He's represented by Scott Boras. It would shock everyone in the industry if he signs before he tests free agency. And you're talking about maybe not only the best player on the team, but the best pitcher on the planet walking out the door. And after a season in which, first off, they came so close to signing Bregman and they weren't able to. And the difference between the two sides, depending on who you talk to, is less than $10 million when that thing didn't work out. And then at the trade deadline, I think they tried to bet on their lead, and that has come back and cost them. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the front office and the ownership to go do something big. Could that be Bo Bichette? Could it be, and I'm just riffing here, speculating, Eugenio Suarez, something, but it does feel like they need another aircraft carrier for their lineup, other than Riley Green.
Do you think they'd be back in on Alex Bregman? Because it does seem that, we saw how both Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso's markets materialized last year. It was the big storyline, how a lot of us thought that they would get more money and then negotiations don't exactly work. Bregman goes to the Red Sox, Pete Alonso back to the Mets. Do you think the market is going to be kinder to the both of them this offseason?
I think Bregman's going to be kind of in the same spot, except 1 year older. And the people I talk to believe that the Tigers could absolutely be back involved. We know AJ Hinch loves him. And also on top of that, and I've heard this around the edges, that there's a perception within the Detroit organization that they need veteran leadership. And we've seen Bregman and what he's done with the Red Sox, phenomenal job. The way that he's been invested in teammates. Team front offices don't necessarily pay for culture. They don't pay for leadership. But if that's the cherry on top with someone that AJ Hinch knows, maybe they go back to Bregman and it's, we'll pay 5 years at 160, 155. Maybe, that's a place that you can land. I just think that they're going to land a veteran who's proven and can help stabilize that lineup.
One quick follow-up to that. Do you think that it's more likely that Alex Bregman opts out and leaves Boston, or do you think he opts out and the Red Sox say, we need this guy in the lineup, here's your long-term deal?
They've seen firsthand, just as they did when Kyle Schwarber was there for that short period of time, and forgive me if I can't remember the exact year. What was it, 2022? Is it the end, or 2021? He was there at the end of the season, and then after he left, you talk to Red Sox people, they're like, man, we need that guy's leadership. Man, that guy's so great. And this winter, they might actually chase him a little bit, and we'll see if that goes. They have a similar situation with Bregman. They know beyond the fact that he's a really good player. I think he's been hurt for a lot of this season, and maybe that's affected his offensive numbers, which have come down a little bit. They love him. But the question is, will John Henry pay him? Right? Alex is a Scott Boras client, which makes me believe that in the end, most of the time, those guys take one of the bigger dollar figures. And we'll see if the Red Sox actually step out. He certainly is in a position to opt out of the contract and to get, a 5-year deal more along the lines of what he wanted to make last winter.
with the impending CBA and just kind of going into this next year where it just creates a unique dynamic. I think the other thing that's fascinating is I think the free agent class is kind of I don't think it's as exciting as last year. There's still a lot of really good players, but I think a lot of teams may end up looking, to maybe address some needs via the trade market. And, I know that's something that the buzz seems to be that it could really start to percolate this offseason of some maybe surprising moves or some bigger swings for the fences. And maybe that was part of the reason why we saw some teams be a bit more timid at the deadline that have prospect capital. How do you see things kind of unfolding from a trade perspective this offseason? And with the impending CBA and just those variables, how do you think that affects the team's pursuit via trade?
Enormously. Okay. Just think of, for an example, if you are the Minnesota Twins and you have Joe Ryan, and we know that at this past trade deadline, after talking with executives after the deadline, it was a general perception was Minnesota wasn't going to trade him, right? They didn't want to have a total fire sale and feed the perception that they were just selling everybody. They keep Joe Ryan. Well, either you're going to sign Joe Ryan to a long-term deal this winter if you're the Twins, or now's the time to trade him. Because think about it. And look, I'm not as I mean, there's so much concern within the industry about the start of the 2027 season being interrupted by a labor stoppage. People have predicted they'll sit out a year, that sort of thing. I'm not nearly that skeptical, but no one knows what's going to happen. Not me, not anybody else. And so if you are a team with a tradable asset, if you wait till next July at the trade deadline to get something in return, teams that might be interested for a player who's under control in 2027, 2028, they're not going to give you the same level of prospects because they don't know what they're paying for. You could trade for, let's say that the Twins held on to Joe Ryan till next July, and you had a team that was interested in trading for him. They don't know what they're going to get out of him in 2027 because they don't even know for sure if they're going to be games. So I made a list here of guys who I think absolutely, if you're going to trade them, this is the time this winter to trade him. Joe Ryan, to me, absolutely will be traded or signed by the Twins, one or the other. Stephen Kwan. We heard his name at the deadline this year. They were very willing to listen. If you're going to get equal value for him, and that's what the Guardians tend to do when they, his players add service time, now's the time to trade him. Adley Rutschman. And I know he hasn't had a good year, but the Baltimore Orioles, they probably need to make a decision sooner rather than later on what they're going to do with Adley. You might get more value now than by waiting until next July. And then the most interesting one is Paul Skeens. Look, I mean, no one I've talked to believes the Pirates actually are interested in trading Paul Skeens. But as we talked about before we started going, he's got so much power, like in a way that you do not see in baseball. In the NBA, players can force themselves out of a situation they don't like. They'll complain publicly. It becomes a thing. That doesn't usually happen in baseball. If Paul Skeens wanted to make this a problem for the Pirates, he could absolutely do that this winter. I don't know how the Pirates would respond, but can you imagine if our offseason started? And again, this is all speculation. I'm just talking about the power he has. If in early November we hear from Paul Skeens' camp, I want out. We have an owner who's not trying to win in good faith. I want to be out, go to a team where I have a chance to win. Let's go. That would be the talk of the offseason. And if you're the Pirates, you'd have to at least examine the possibility of when is the best time to trade him. It would be in December.
Do you think go ahead, Arm.
I was just going to say, I feel like for it to get there, there'd have to be a lot of frustration, obviously, right? But they've already created a head start on that. And you see the team, and he just turns in another Cy Young or another Cy Young caliber.
Going to win a Cy Young award, right?
Going to win a Cy Young award, and you figure he's going to go back out there next year, and assuming he's healthy, be the favorite to do that again. They have Bubba Chandler now up and throwing well, but took forever to get him up there, to get him the opportunity. The offense, though, like we just looked at it all year long and said, man, this is ridiculous. if they don't make any moves, and even just to sign, I don't even think they need to do anything crazy, right? Just a couple 1-2 year bats that just signify, hey, we're trying to piece together this offense. You got Connor Griffin on the way. You got some other guys that at least can potentially help. It is unprecedented to a degree to have a baseball player do that. So do you think, whether it's Paul Skeens or not, do you ever see that happening with a baseball player in the next few years? Like, do you think that's something that we end up seeing start to shift? Because I think in every league you're seeing more power to the players, and it takes a transcendent player. Skeens is just that, and it takes a transcendent player in a really tough situation. And this is a very extreme, I think, example of that. Is this what you think it would require for this to really happen in baseball?
And it has happened, but it's taken different forms. It happened with Rafael Devers, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we want you to take ground balls at first base. We could use you at first. No. Owner flies out to Kansas City with the head of baseball operations. Hey, Rafi, double secret, please. Ice cream, cherries on top. We get take ground balls? No.
Yeah.
He basically did force his way out of Boston. Here's the question about, for me, is this Paul Skeens, who has a reputation of being very even keel guy. He just focuses on what he does, work. Is he the type of personality who'd want to take that on? Because that's not a comfortable place to be.
No.
There are guys, excuse the language, who are just total shit stirrers and like to do that. Paul Skeens is not that guy. And he would have to sort of go into that territory. But it was interesting to me. I'm sure you guys saw it after I think it was his most recent start, where he came out and he talked about lessons that the Pirates need to learn, right? And everyone got things, and I read those as being, he basically is saying, like, we need to get better. And that's in his head someplace. And that's why I wonder because I'm sure people have told him around him, his representative, look, if you want to try to force your way out, you could absolutely do that. I just don't know if that's something he wants to take on.
So if the Pirates were to trade Paul Skeens, what teams do you think actually could do it? Because you have to have a combination of money to give him a huge contract, plus you have to give up a boatload of prospects to the Pirates. So if he were to get traded, again, we are just speculating, who do you think those teams would be?
The usual suspects. I mean, let's face it, right? If you are, the big market teams would be all in. And you're right. It would feel a little like a Garrett Crochet situation where the team would be acquiring the player with the understanding there's going to be a long-term deal. Francisco Lindor being acquired by the Mets. I'm sure that the Yankees would go all in on something like that. The Dodgers have been relatively reticent to trade prospects. I think that would be blown up. Approach.
Yeah, you change your plans there.
Yeah, David Dombrowski. Anyone who's called about Andrew Painter said no. Yeah, we're not doing that. For Paul Skeens, possibly in part of that deal. What are you kidding? I remember, a situation. Remember when Cliff Lee, he was in the trade market, and Texas was involved in that. We were talking to Ron Washington once before the game, as that trade talk was playing out. And at that time, Justin Smoke was like this big up and coming prospect. And would Justin Smoke ever be traded? And I remember talking to Wash before a game and asking him, hey, can you imagine Justin Smoke being traded? He goes, no, he's a really good player, blah, blah, blah. And I said, now, what if it's Cliff Lee? And he said, if we can get Cliff Lee, Smoke got to go. And I think that if you're talking about Paul Skeens, you would have a lot of players, or excuse me, a lot of teams that would basically say, here's our prospect list. What can we do?
Yeah. And so I want to, one of my last questions here is that Dodgers situation that I think is fascinating. It makes sense given their stars, they're in a position here where they're the World Series, favorite or one of probably for the next couple of years, but they are probably very aware that their stars are aging and they need players to replace some of those guys, and they can't just always go the free agency route to fill out their entire roster. So that's why in this free agency, this deadline, we saw them a little bit more cautious and said, hey, we can't, mortgage the future. We need these layers of talent. And they've got that coming up, obviously, with Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope and just several other guys, and even a Freeland. And you can look at some arms that are intriguing. And how do you see them approaching the next year or so? And I know a lot of baseball fans have Dodger fatigue just because of the way that they've run things, and I really just been dominant in the free agent landscape and the trade side of things. So I think fans are probably refreshed to hear that they're toning it down and hoping to build from within. But as you said, like, when players become available, the Dodgers have the prospect capital that few other organizations have, and just capital period, and they can make things happen. Do you see them sticking to this kind of patient plan, knowing what they've got with the future Hall of Famers on their big league team and knowing that they've got young talent on the way? Or do you think it's more likely that not even a Skeens, but something else pops up and they can't help themselves?
I think the way you framed that was perfect. I'll just co-sign on what you said. I think as time has gone on, when if you remember when this ownership group came in, they spent a lot of money on a lot of players. They made the big Adrian Gonzalez trade with the Red Sox. Their feeling at that time was, look, we just need to fill in this gap, talent gap, until we have a position to have our own player development. And they did that, and they've done really well with it. It's been incredibly underrated to me. It's the underrated part of what the Dodgers have accomplished. How at the back, despite the fact they're picking at the back end of drafts, they still, the Will Smiths and Walker Buellers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I still think that they'll always have that mindset. They'll never do the scorched earth approach with prospects. Andrew Friedman, a lot of times we see guys go from the Tampa Bay, model, small market teams, and then they go to big market teams. They struggle with that transition. Andrew, I think, has done it perfectly. Like he's managed to figure out how to work in both worlds, where I think for other guys, it has been somewhat of a struggle. And I do wonder, like, again, that's part of the reason why I would love to be a fly on the wall for those conversations between Stearns and Cohen, because David's instinct is, I can figure it out. Like, I can make it work. Well, you're the head of baseball operations for the Mets. You don't have to. you can go get your version of an Ohtani or Blake Snell or Glasnow. You guys have the money to do that, and I think Andrew has figured out that balance.
Two players that I really want to ask you about before we let you go, and I'm realizing I could talk free agency with you for 24 hours straight, but of course we want to be respectful of your time. Kyle Schwarber, 56 home runs. He has been one of the best hitters in baseball in a contract year, perfect year for 56 home runs. Right. What is his market going to look like? Because the bat is incredible, but he's going to be into his early to mid 30s, and he's a DH at the end of the day. Do you think teams are going to feel comfortable giving a guy like that a 9-figure contract? And if they are, which teams would do it?
I think there absolutely would be teams that do it. I think the Red Sox would be very interested in reunion if they got the opportunity. I've wondered. I mean, Kyle's such an interesting personality. They're most of the time when players sign contracts, and it's their prerogative to do this. They'll take the most money, and that's okay, right? They've earned that right to do that. Kyle's one of the rare players who I've wondered in the back of his head. He's like, I'd love to go back to the Midwest. Maybe I'll call up the Reds and see what they'll offer.
Might break the home run record there.
Yeah, right. Would. I know. Imagine him in that ballpark. But in the end, I don't think that's going to happen. In the end, I think the Phillies are going to pay him what is going to be required plus. When we started, I'd say 3 months ago, I started having conversations with various people about Schwarber. And the estimates I was getting back was like 3 for 120. 3 years for $120 million. And that perception at that time was that I was going to be on the high end. Well, given what he's accomplished, given his leadership, all those things, the John Middleton, the Phillies owner, loves him. Maybe there's a fourth year in there built on a vesting option. Maybe he can get it straight up. And he goes 4 for 160. I haven't talked to anybody who thinks he's going anywhere but the Philadelphia Phillies.
And I just had one more on the international free agent market, because we've heard about Munetaka Murakami. We've even heard about Tatsuya Imai. He's this excellent pitcher in the MPB, putting up incredible numbers. Jack, who's actually sitting next to Arm right now in the Marlins booth, he brought him up and how he ended the season really strong. Similar build to Yamamoto with just a myriad of excellent pitches. We've seen guys come over and dominate. What's your pulse right now on international free agency?
So I haven't specifically pulled a number in the way that I did some of the other guys, but I think, I mean, based on what I've talked with teams, they think those guys are going to do really well because of what you mentioned before, that it's not like this really big free agent class. And I think there is certainly a lot more confidence than, say, 10 years ago, the Daisuke Matsuzaka, that, when he came over, and there are times when he was really good and times that he didn't live up to the hype. I think there's a lot more confidence that there can be a relatively seamless transition for the guys coming over here and playing. And the teams we're talking about. I mean, the Mets, I think, are going to be really aggressive this winter, especially if they don't make the playoffs. There's going to be tons of pressure on them. Steve Cohen's going to, potentially be throwing around his checkbook. I think the Orioles. I mean, the Orioles, are they going to participate in some form or fashion with the pitching market? They don't have anyone in. You would assume, like, their window has begun to pass us. You would assume that they would be involved. So I think that, those guys are going to get paid.
Thank you so much, Buster, for coming on. Just one more
Sure.
quick thing. We've talked about so many different free agents. I'm curious if you have one more thing that we haven't touched on. That's, again, going back to my first question, taking up real estate in your mind.
Okay. So I had fun with this. I think Josh Naylor is going to do well this winter. There are not a lot of players like him in the market. Now it feels like that, there's so much swing and miss, and there's just so much focus on power. I think, based on what I hear, he's going to get like a Christian Walker type deal, like a 3 for $60. The question is, how do teams look at a first base market with him and Pete Alonso? They're two very different players. And Naylor, even this year, demonstrating, he can hit with runner in scoring position. He can hit lefties, hit righties, tough at bats, steal bases. I know. And he's gotten better as a first baseman. So it'll be interesting to see how those two guys impact each other to me. First base is not a market where, I mean, typically guys haven't gotten paid there. And we've seen those, the Christian Walkers, that teams being comfortable with a Jose Abreu, Christian Walker type, $60 million. And Pete's obviously going to be looking for a lot more than that.
Well, Buster, again, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure having you. Can't wait to check you again out on baseball tonight. RM, anything else before we say goodbye?
No, that's all I got. I think we would love to circle back with you as it gets closer. This was amazing stuff. But thank you for all the information and for taking so much time with us. And again, very excited to check in with you guys on Baseball Tonight, the podcast. You and Hembo do an awesome job. So definitely recommend everybody. We'll plug that all in the intro and outro. But implore everybody to continue to check that out. I'm sure they have already.
Of course they have.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Super fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.